Thank you for joining another conversation, our Informed Resistance series. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by my friend and colleague, Bill Hartung. Bill is a senior fellow at the Quincy Institute. He's the author last year of the now totally outdated book, The Trillion Dollar War Machine, that we're going to talk about anyway and explain why it's outdated. He also, for decades, has been the foremost progressive analyst and thinker when it comes to Pentagon spending issues and overall Pentagon strategy, and really been crusading for reorienting American military policy and foreign policy away from reliance on weapons and violence and war and destruction and towards diplomacy and negotiation. So we're going to talk today about those issues, which are very live as the Congress is now debating multiple Pentagon spending bills. Bill, thanks for joining us today.
Well, it's an honor. I mean, you host people over Pentagon, and Savannah Wooten and Sanjeev Bear are leading the fight. So that's the least I could do.
Well, let's start by plugging your book, which I unfairly disparaged at the outset. Trillion Dollar War Machine. What are you writing about in the Trillion Dollar War Machine? What is the Trillion Dollar War Machine?
Well, I should start by saying I didn't want to do the book because I was like, I've been writing about this stuff for decades. Nobody's listening to me. And then Ben Freeman, my colleague, I was visiting him in Florida, and he said, Bill, I had this great idea for a book. And it was just what the publisher asked me that I was debating whether to do. So we agreed to do it together. And then we signed a contract. 3 months later, Ben and Anna had their second child. And I think Ben thought he would just keep writing, 2 kids in diapers, no problem. So there was 3 months there where he was busy being a father, which should take precedence, obviously. And I was freaking out, just writing nonsense. And then when he came back, he fixed it. Also, he knows everybody in creation, either through his poker game, CrossFit. So he was interviewing lobbyists and I don't know who. And also he's more level-headed. So my head would explode. He would make it intelligible again. So it was a very pleasurable experience. And it came, unfortunately, at the right time. I mean, usually people only want to talk to me when things are going very, very badly in the global scene. And unfortunately, this is one of those times. But we have solved the $1 trillion problem, which, when we did it, when we thought $1 trillion was off in the future when we conceived of the book. It was already over $1 trillion when the book came out. Now, of course, our narcissist in chief wants 1.5 trillion. So we're starting a sticker series, and you can just pick a number and put it on the book. Could be 0, could be 750, it could be 1.5. I'm thinking, do a Seinfeld thing, do the opposite, since they never listened about, how about 3 trillion? And the Pentagon will be like, maybe we should cut it. Hartung thinks we need 3 trillion. So anyway, the sticker series is a separate matter and it's to be delivered, but I think we're going to charge more for the stickers than for the book because, reading books is kind of old school,
Yeah, there's still a way to convey ideas. I worry about sort of throwing out the high number and thinking you're being sarcastic because you may just find out that you were for telling the truth.
No, it's like people.
But let's step back. Let's step back for a second to people who are part of our ongoing conversation. Just actually, the $1 trillion war machine. You're writing about the Pentagon budget.
Yes,
and you wrote, and so the book published last year. I don't know, exactly when you started working on it, but tell us about sort of going backwards from before the book was published. Why were you talking about $1 trillion war machine, and what were you documenting in the book?
Well, now, certainly with what Trump is pushing and with the separate Iran war budget, and of course with all the military-related stuff, we're spending more on the Pentagon and military-related things than at any time since the height of World War II. At the same time that we've got the big ugly bill cutting domestic programs to a degree we didn't think possible. But when we were starting the book a couple of years ago, $1 trillion was like the dream of the hawks, like the upper limit. And now there seems to be no limit. And of course, if you fight stupid wars and enable genocide, you're going to run low on ammunition. So now it's like, oh, gee, we have no ammunition. Let's double the size of the military-industrial complex. And it's not like any of these conflicts are making us safer. So, the complex is sort of demonstrating why it's dysfunctional. But these kind of leftover myths about, you need more for defense and spending more as an insurance policy, or, the demonization of others and kind of whitewashing our own issues. All of that is getting in the way of what should be an easier fight to reduce this. But I'm quite pleased that there's people both trying to cut the regular Pentagon budget and this maneuver where they want to get some of it through reconciliation, which you can decide whether we should spend time explaining that, but a separate maneuver that might be blocked. So I would say we're finally getting our footing. We're up against a lot of money, a lot of power, a lot of lies, a lot of nonsense. But I'm quite impressed, especially with my younger colleagues, because they get it. And thankfully, they have more energy than a 71-year-old white dude sitting in Manhattan. So I think we have a shot here to really start turning this around.
So, one of the confounding and challenging things about trying to block increases and then actually reduce Pentagon spending is breaking through with what's been normalized at the scale that's being spent. So you just said something that's so important. Like the $1 trillion level, let's forget about where they're going, but where we're at, people should understand is we're spending $1 trillion in this fiscal year on the Pentagon and related programs.
Well, the problem is
Which,
we could succeed, in an amazing way, like block 400 of the 500 billion, and they'd still end up with a 10% increase on an obscene budget. So in that sense, people need to understand where we are starting from.
right. So the $1 trillion is about half of everything the government spends. It's not, in the non discretionary space, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. And it gets very little examination, just happens in its own bubble. I mean, there's a fight about how the money is allocated between different weapon systems or priorities, but the money, given that it's like half the effective budget, is barely quibbled over. How does that come to be?
Well, I think, you've got hawks who truly believe we need to spend more. They also happen to be lining their pockets, so which comes first? Then you have progressives who feel compromised because they don't want to vote against jobs in their district. But people have done it. John Tierney, when he was in Congress, head of Council for Livable World, he stood up to Raytheon. Tom Andrews in Maine did the same. Sarah Jacobs, San Diego's a floating naval base. She stands up on certain issues. So it can be done, but it's a minority of folks. I mean, even Mark Pocan, who's carried some of our bills to cut, he said there's a company in his district that makes some tiny little widget, and they're always in his face. If you cut, our widget won't get built, and you lose like 3 jobs in your district or something. One time, Dianne Feinstein went to bat for a company to transfer arms to a repressive regime to save 25 jobs in the state of California. So this notion of not voting against jobs in your district gets in the way, and then it's like, well, you vote for my weapon, I'll vote for your weapon. Next thing you know, the thing is locked down. So it's pork barrel politics, it's ideology, and also there's still Democrats who feel like they're viewed as soft on defense. Well, what could be more disastrous than our defense policy of this century? 2 failed wars, massive devastation, hurting our vets, blowing a hole in our budget, undermining our ability to solve other problems. Those myths die hard, because if you took a cold, hard look at Iraq and Afghanistan and this illegal war against Iran that's still being wrapped up, or subsidizing genocide in Gaza, or ethnic cleansing and occupation in Lebanon, none of that is making any American safer. It is enriching many people. It is advancing a certain geopolitical agenda. But to call that defense would be a travesty. So I feel like the public has to catch up with the reality of what this all is doing to us. And, it's groups like the folks listening here that had that challenge, that communications challenge, and also the feeling that we can do this. Because apparently I have learned, now that I'm 71, being correct is not enough. In fact, you can lose many, many battles, even though your arguments make sense. It only took me 30 or 40 years to figure that out. Now I'm spend more time talking to organizers, and young people can finish the job when I'm off, I don't know, being transformed into a can of frozen peas or something, whatever happens when you die. So I feel like it's harder than it should be. But a lot of it is not just the money. It's how people view themselves, how they view America, whether they feel empowered to do anything. Because a lot of people that are with us feel like, yeah, but it's hopeless. So many different fronts on which to fight, which is why we need all different kinds of skills, all different kinds of expertise. Everybody has something to bring to the fight.
Yeah, there's one thing that you were mentioning in that the sort of, I think, powerfully comprehensive list factors explain how all this happens. But one thing that you've been documenting for a really long time, but you just kind of referenced there, maybe you could tease out, is how military production is spread out intentionally throughout the country, and what the political consequences are of that.
Yeah, well, some of the pioneers of analyzing this, like Chuck Spinney and Winslow Wheeler and others, call it social and political engineering. Like Lockheed Martin, I think still has this on their website, the employment impact of the F-35. It's an interactive map, and you can press your state. It'll tell you how many jobs Lockheed Martin claims are in your state, the F-35, which is maybe twice what there are. And there's 46 states that have some jobs. But if even by their own measure, I punched on Nebraska, one job, they could probably do without that job. And 80% of the jobs were either in California, Texas, or Georgia. So the idea that the whole country is resting on this program is just not the case. And then there's people like Taylor Barnes at Inkstick, who is an amazing investigative journalist. She found a document from the major trade association for the weapons industry that said, well, 30 years ago, there were 3 million people directly involved in building weapons. Now there's 1 million. So spending's gone up, jobs have gone down, either because of automation or overseas production, and then of course with the tech revolution, I swear you could run a data center with like 6 people once you build the thing. So they're not even going to have jobs to offer. But if it's your job in your district and your members on the right committee, it doesn't take that many jobs to put the whole system in gridlock. And many times when the Pentagon wants to get rid of things, Congress says, no, you're not going to hurt my district. So there's ships they want to retire, there's planes they want to retire. And so since they can't do that, they have to do both. It's like the Pentagon budget's like a sedimentary rock. Nothing goes away, just builds. So you got all the old stuff and the new stuff. And that's how you get to $1 trillion or 1.5 trillion. And of course, if your only tool in your foreign policy toolkit is war, I mean, they devastated AID, their idea of diplomacy is insulting other countries, then there's no end to what you could spend because they're trying to do something that's impossible. You cannot provide global security through the barrel of a gun. You can, though, enrich a lot of people, and that they've been quite effective at.
And then to make sure everybody is sort of level set with this, so we have this year $1 trillion roughly Pentagon budget, which is about $900 billion through the regular spending process, and about 100 they layered on through the big ugly bill, the tax and budget reconciliation bill, where the Pentagon got $150 billion over 2 years. Now Trump has come in and said, and Hegseth have come in and said that they want a $1.5 trillion Pentagon budget for the next year. How do you think about that in terms of, number one, connecting it to the authoritarianism of this regime, and number two, what the heck are they going to do with $600 billion more than the previous base budget?
Well, exactly, because they don't have the factories, the skilled people to spend that effectively. They might as well just send it by Venmo to Palantir and Lockheed Martin and get it over with. Then they can bid up their stock prices and go home happy. But they want to seize the moment. And the authoritarian aspect, it's about instilling fear. It could be fear of China, could be fear of immigrants, it could be fear of Muslims, could be fear of a trans person walking into the bathroom while you're there. Whatever it takes. I mean, this whole thing of cleansing the Department of Defense of DEI or the War Department, which is appropriate given what they've been doing these last decades. What is that all about? I mean, I thought the military is supposed to represent America. So you would want people of color. You would want trans people. You would want people who are reluctant warriors, but who will defend the country when needed and who are loyal to the Constitution. Pete Hegseth's idea of the military is the Michigan militia with better guns loyal to Donald Trump, almost like a royal constabulary or a palace guard. And we cannot allow that to happen. And I don't think we will. And I think there's a lot of people inside who are opposed to this in the military, as well as groups like Common Defense and About Face and Veterans for Peace, and some of the more traditional vets groups who are like, no, this is this is not what the military is supposed to be about. I do think we've got a lot to work with. But the problem is, if you're going to ignore the law and engage in maximum destruction and do what Bannon said, well, the thing is, we need muzzle velocity. If you fire 6 bullets at once, 4 of them will get through. That's essentially the approach of this version of the Trump administration. Throw so much bad stuff at people, they don't know where to start. And so all of that means they can destroy a lot, undermine a lot in short order, whereas organizing takes time. It takes building relationships. It takes connecting people. It takes tolerating differences to go for the big issues. I think we can do it, but we are in a bit of a race against the clock. And thankfully, I think we have a lot of really talented, nimble, creative, committed people on our side. And we just need to figure out the best way to work together,
And then as you can apply that sort of metaphor to the Pentagon budget, and you can see one thing they're doing is asking for this really preposterous, unprecedented increase, a 67% increase over the base, which is already far too much and stealing from other priority needs and enabling waste and fraud, but $600 billion more, meaning that they want to get it, but knowing that if they got half of it, to be that itself would be an unprecedented increase. And then also using like this very complicated set of maneuvers to ask for at least 3 separate increases to the budget, all instead of just one in the course of the normal appropriations process.
And that's not all, because the venture capital firms in Silicon Valley are also investing in militarism. So that's private capital that could be better used. The sovereign wealth funds of UAE and Saudi Arabia are investing in things like, a drone company that Don Jr. is on the board of, or pouring money into defense startups in Silicon Valley. So there's this huge wave. And of course, when these VC companies invest, they want those companies that they put the money down to succeed. And success is getting a big fat Pentagon contract. So now you've got the manufacturers lobbying for more money. You've got the VC companies lobbying for more money. You've got the Gulf states lobbying for more money. You have Israel trying to do this end run around military aid by doing this integration into the U.S. defense industry, kind of a merger of the two. So there's just a lot of moving parts. But I was doing I was seeing how the polls were going the other day. I had already voted. And this wonderful young woman in my neighborhood said, Bill, could you explain this Israel-U.S. Military-industrial integration thing to me? And I said, well, you came to the right place, because my colleagues, Steve Simon and Freeman, have been working overtime on this. But the fact that she doesn't work on foreign policy. So the fact that she had that question, I mean, granted, it's Manhattan, she's a smart kid, whatever. I found that promising. I think there's just a different level. I think because of the ceasefire movement, because the genocide, and prior to that, the war in Yemen, these big things you can't look away from, just awful humanitarian crises where our tax money and weapons built in our country have been at the center of it. I think it has awakened an interest in foreign policy that's different. Because they always say elections are bread and butter. And in this case, it's both, of course, because they're stealing from the domestic side to do this. And the Project on Government Oversight did a study where they said, well, what about the other costs of militarism? Like, spending on veterans and the share of the debt that goes to pay for past wars. And that'll add another $500 billion on top of all this. So we've created the garrison state that Eisenhower feared. And we're undermining everything else. Things like climate and pandemics. If Trump has his way, we'll spend less in the next year on the EPA and the Centers for Disease Control, which deal with climate and pandemics, than the first week of his illegal war in Iran. Now, that is just absurd and obscene, and yet it's happening. And so I think people aren't going to stand for this, but we need to pull together, which means just washing away all the divisive rhetoric, not just between right and left, but within the left. Like, if I'm only for 22 of your 23 objectives, work with me anyway. I mean, we've got stuff to take care of here. It doesn't mean the other issues get thrown under the bus. It means we come together in a moment of global emergency to go after the big problem. But it doesn't mean we don't deal with gender issues and racial issues. It just means we agree that there's a bigger problem here that we have to solve, which is if we let them control our budget, our economy, our democracy, nothing we care about can get done. And so that's different for people, that kind of coming together, some of the risks we may have to take. Frankly, anybody doing anything is a good thing. There's probably tens of millions of people in this country who are still like, I don't know what to do. I don't have an answer. Well, neither do I. But I know that if more of us are in the fight, our chance of figuring out is better. And everybody's got to decide what they can do. But everybody knows different people, different institutions. They're a different resource for the movement. So I'm hoping to really get a sense of we're all in this together. And also there can even be joy in the struggle. I mean, it's actually better to get together with people and fight for the right thing than to work for a robot. Just saying,
We'll do another podcast about that one. And then just to come back on the Pentagon money, I think one of the takeaways is, like all these details matter, but not to be overwhelmed and not to be fooled either. Like all this has to be resisted.
Yeah, no, I
they
think
don't really care. They don't really care if they get the money in from bucket 1, bucket 2, or bucket 3, which we don't even need to talk about what those different buckets are. They just want the money, and we
right.
make to make sure.
And
they
the
don't
thing
get it.
is, we may not win on all three fronts, but we're building for the future. If we block the $300 billion that's coming through reconciliation, if we whittle down or stop the war budget, and they still get a little money, that's job one. And then we fight again next year and the next year and the next year. So the point is building momentum, building allies, getting some backbone behind the members of Congress who need our support. I mean, they are just inundated with money and lobbyists, and all of them are doing 8 different things, and their staffers are trying to sort through 3,000-page bills, and the friendly lobbyist says, "Oh, let me help you, young person. This is what's in the bill, and by the way, do this for my company." All of that can change, but it's a difference between fighting for a reform that's the last step and fighting for reforms that are building blocks for the future. And I think that's what People for Pentagon is about, and a lot of the groups are viewing it in that fashion. We're not going to win it all at once, but we're going to build power, and even sometimes a loss if we make our point loud and clear, and they throw us under the bus at the last minute. People see the injustice of that. That too can build for the future.
Agree, although hoping for some wins. And then just for people listening who don't know this, so you referenced it, Public Citizen runs and shepherds and coordinates the People Over Pentagon Coalition, which is focusing on Pentagon spending. As we're talking, we're in the middle of this fight over this request through multiple different vehicles to jump the budget to 1.5 trillion. And what's happening with no recent precedent is that there is widespread and fairly general at this point resistance to these requests from the Democratic Party. So not just the members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus say, but the center of gravity in the Democratic Party is no, we're not going for these budget requests.
Oh yeah, I mean, there were people who voted against the NDAA who never would have done that before, right? I mean,
right, which that's the defense authorization bill sets the overall dollar amount and sort of policy for the Pentagon, and almost every Democrat on the Armed Services Committee in the House voted against the bill. Everyone on the Senate side voted against the bill, and that's in a place where the culture is pass this thing on through.
Oh yeah, no, it used to be you'd raise whatever issue you had, and then you'd vote for the final bill. So voting against the bill is progress. It shows that there's been a shift in the political. There's been kind of a political earthquake that's changed how Congress looks at what's in their interest even in a narrow sense politically, when they look at these matters.
Yeah, and in some ways, we haven't won yet, but in some ways, that first step is the hardest thing because along with everything that the military-industrial complex relies on to keep the budget progressively getting bigger, 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 is just the normalization that it's going to get bigger, bigger, and bigger, and the sense that fighting against that is tilting at windmills. That's plainly not true now. It's not. There's nothing inevitable. It's not certain what's going to happen with the budget. There's a reasonable chance it's not going to go up at all, despite the request, which is where we're aiming for, despite the request for $600 billion. And at minimum, it's going to be a hard fight. So we've shattered that expectation that it's just going to sort of be rubber stamped through.
I think there's a course in political affairs where suddenly doing the right thing becomes cool. Like I went to Columbia in 1973 thinking it was going to be this big radical campus. No such luck. We couldn't get arrested. But then we started the South Africa divestment campaign. It was kind of cool again. And people were doing it. And like you couldn't really defend the apartheid regime. That was a tough sell for the other side. And so I think if people realize it's okay to stand up on this, it's okay to raise your voice, we could actually win. Then you can get a surge of interest in a relatively short order when it seems like small groups and laboring in the vineyards forever, and we're not. It's like the myth of Sisyphus. You're pushing the stone up the hill, and it's rolling back on you, and you do it again. But we're going to get over the hill and over the hump and start going down again because people are going to join us because they're going to think it's the thing to do. But the only reason it's the thing to do is because so many people have worked so hard in the shadows all these years so that when the moment came, we could rise to that occasion.
And that's a perfect stopping point, and we should stop, but I really want to cover one more thing, so we won't. You were flagging the thing about the VCs, which for people, that's venture capital, but really talking about this new surge of interest and investment from Silicon Valley companies in military technology and their aspiration to get giant Pentagon contracts. Can you just give us a thumbnail of what's going on and how that relates to the traditional contractors, Lockheed, Raytheon, and the others?
Yeah, well, I call them the three horsemen of the apocalypse: Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, and Palmer Luckey. There's probably other horsemen. Those are the three that I know who I deal with. And not only do they want to get all in on military tech, but they kind of look down on the legacy companies. Yeah, we're the new kids on the block. We have a better business model. We know the software. Let's give Lockheed Martin a lifetime achievement award and get out of the way so we can take in the money. Of course, if you spend enough money, you can feed both groups, which is what Golden Dome is all about. The hardware will be the old companies and the software will be the new companies. But so there's danger in that technology and this notion that technology will save us, which it has not done in Vietnam or Iraq or Afghanistan or with Reagan's allegedly perfect Star Wars, nor will it with Golden Dome. But that notion that American technology is going to make the difference dies hard. All we're going to do if we throw money at technology is have an accelerated arms race with China. And China's not Iraq or Afghanistan. They have a technological base. They have more room to spend on weapons should they choose to do so. They're building up their nuclear force in part because for years they held steady and we kept building up around them. So, that's a bad bet, getting in a military fight with China when we should be working with them on things like dealing with climate and stabilizing the global economy, things that the United States, even with the best of intentions, could not do alone. So, I just think we're at this moment where we can't let a bunch of like self-important tech bros, they're not all bros, but they act kind of broy, run our government, our foreign policy. I mean, Palmer Luckey made the Oculus, which is his home virtual reality thing. Then he sold it for a boatload of money. And Peter Thiel said, "Hey, why don't you get into weapons?" So he did. His idea of a joke is in his blog. He said, "Wouldn't it be cool if when you play a first-person shooter game, when your character in the game dies, you die too?" So he made a helmet that would explode if your character died in the game. Now, he's never hooked it up, but apparently he keeps it on his desk as a little mascot. And he goes on TV and says, "Oh, yeah, we're going to bury China." These are not people you want making your foreign policy. And yet they're deeply embedded in this administration through J.D. Vance, who was groomed in Silicon Valley, through the people who are in the administration from Silicon Valley, through the money that people like Musk threw in, through the Doge, which devastated large parts of our domestic economy on behalf of the tech sector. So it's deep in, but the problem is, or the challenge is, we might get the worst of both worlds because they're embedded in the executive branch, but the legacy companies are embedded in the Congress because those weapons exist, those facilities exist, and so they're going to have a hard time getting rid of them. So the nightmare scenario is they pay off both. You build the new tech, you build the old tech. There's nothing left, and so we have to say a pox on both of those houses because defense is not primarily about building weapons. It's about having a healthy, well-educated, unified country that knows a conspiracy theory from reality, that takes care of its health, et cetera, et cetera. The kind of more balanced approach that Eisenhower was trying to explain, all those years ago, that's what makes us safe. And if we think that throwing money at tech and worshiping at the altar of Silicon Valley is going to make us safer, we're going to be very sorely disappointed. But I think people are starting to get hip to that. I mean, I really do, because they're almost like cartoonish. These folks, they're like cartoon villains. I mean, the head of Lockheed Martin would never go on TV and say we're going to bury China. He would fund a think tank to say that, or he would talk to his investors and say, "Well, the turbulence in the Middle East could, create some business opportunities for us as we help promote stability through our allies in the region." He would cover it up in some kind of antiseptic language. These folks don't care. They're just going for it. And that their kind of naked, greedy, inhumane approach to life, I think, will eventually redound to our benefit, because why would you want people like that shaping the future for yourself, your kids, the next generations? You would not. And so it's not that I'm glad that they're unhinged and inhumane, but it changes the debate. There's nowhere to hide, in my opinion, if you really just had an honest, cold, hard look at what we're doing and what we should be doing.
Yeah, I think that's right. For people who don't know, Palmer Luckey is a young guy who claims to have more video games than anybody in the world, and he's now the head of a company called Anduril, Anduril, which is
He
one of
had,
the leading tech
he, he,
defense companies.
he attacked me on X. He said I was a shill. And I said, well, who am I shilling for? The peace movement? Which, of course, to him would be a threat. But, it's like this guy has time on his hands. I think he was objecting to something I wrote for Tom Dispatch, which is not the average reading of a corporate executive. So,
Well, I'm glad he's checking that out.
but I feel like, yeah, he needs a hobby that doesn't involve making things that kill people.
That would be good. Anyway, these characters, I think, as you're saying, who are cartoonish, him particularly, they're kind of having them on the one hand, and this, just crazy $600 billion spending request on the other. Is both of them are huge threats, but they also are genuine opportunities for us because they're so outlandish, so extreme. Their efforts to sort of go all in, I think, is making it easier and creating openings for us to
Well,
say,
yeah.
absolutely not. None. No, not a little bit of what they want, none of what they want.
No, I think the greed quotient's never been higher, and the justification for what they're doing has never been weaker. So this is our moment.
All right. We're going to end with that. This is our moment. Thank you, Bill Hartung from the Quincy Institute. Joy to talk to you as always. And just appreciate all you've done.
You're the one who explained everything. If it was up to me, nobody would know what's the people over Pentagon, how does the budget work. Without you, the whole bones of the thing would have fallen apart. So I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, everybody. It's Robert Weissman with Public Citizen. This has been another in our Informed Resistance discussion series. We will be back again with you next week. Thank you all.
Thanks.